What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Eric Phillips, and welcome to another episode of the Meraki podcast. Today, I have an awesome opportunity to talk with a friend of mine that I've known for a good few years now. Man, I think we're getting close to that 7-8 year mark, and it's been an awesome journey, and it's been great knowing you. And so today, what we're going to do, we're just going to shine our light on my brother, Mr. Frank Gallagher. Frank, thank you for coming on to the podcast, bro.
Hey, my man, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. When you reached out to me like about a week ago or something like that, 1 or 2 weeks ago, about being on this podcast, I was like, oh my god, what? Like just a few months ago, I was still trying to get my bearings down, and now like one of my good friends is like, hey, I want you on a podcast to talk about what you've been up to and all the film stuff, and I'm like, oh my god, sure, why not?
Yes, sir. Yeah, man. Thank you, bro. It's awesome because like the whole idea of this podcast is pretty much to shine light on people that do whatever it is that they do with passion and love, man. And so we're gonna go get it right into it.
Awesome, awesome.
Okay.
Um,
So Frank, tell us a little bit about you. Who is Frank Gallagher?
so yeah, first off, hi, my name is Frank, Frank Gallagher, as Eric just said. um I'm a lot of things. Over the years I've definitely kind of like shifted from one thing to another, but the one thing that I've always been is a visually creative person. um I still do, for a long time was solely a director of photography, videographer. Now it's director of photography, videographer, news steadicam operator, which is an interesting thing to throw into the mix. I've been working for News Nation ever since April 10th of 2023. It's not even been a year yet, and it's been quite the ride of my life. Born and raised in Baldwin, New York. Known that area my entire life, and never moved away. And I had always been a very at home, didn't really want to like go out on the weekends much kind of guy unless it was for film. uh there have been many a times where Eric has reached out to me and says, hey man, I need you for a shoot this week, like this weekend, and insert date. Like, what are you up to? Then me, I'll make it work. Because like this man lived at the time extremely far away from me. He still kind of does now. Uh, but I would argue it might be a little bit easier to get to at this point. I'm not sure. um, just a little bit. But it's working with Eric is always so much fun. Um, and I would absolutely always do my best to go out of the way to work with him because, like, hey man, films are films, and there's very few shoots I've been on where I can say the people that I work with feel like family, and Eric is one of those people. Um, so I will, whenever I'm able to, I will always do my best to go out of the way to be there for him. Um, I think the best way I could wrap myself up now in terms of who I would say I am is, like I said, I'm a very visually creative person. I've also, over the past few months, become much more critical of a lot of things. So I guess the best way that I could put it is, not only creatively have I grown and I've allowed myself to venture into different aspects of my career, between, live news stuff, short films, commercials, all this stuff. I have become ever so focused on the way the world has been working, and it makes me want to work on different projects to shine light on mental health and these important things, because I do believe that right now we are in one of the largest and most dangerous mental health crises that we've seen in a very long, long time. I think a lot of people are feeling somewhat hopeless, but I also feel like there's a lot of people that are finding genuine hope and excitement in the way the world is right now. At least where we are. right now. I know many people are not as lucky as we are to be in a position where we could sit down and chat about stuff that we're up to. A lot of people might be searching for their next meal, or a lot of people might be fighting to try and just stay alive, honestly. Um, and I've definitely, I think like, aside from being critical, I think the best way that I could describe who I am now is a little overly optimistic, and yeah, I feel like a little overly optimistic kind of always is at the crux of it. But also being prepared for bad news is like, that's the way I am. Is I'll build up myself for something exciting, and I'll get really excited, but I'll always have that in the back of my mind, like, hey, remember, stuff could go wrong, and you have to be ready for that. So Frank Gallagher is, I think, a charismatic, patient, critical, semi-pessimistic, but also optimistic, creative individual that just wants to bring to light stories that have not been told either before or in a long time that need a refresh. Be it from walks of my own life, um, from my own trials and tribulations, or being able to be the camera, the camera eye, for lack of a better term, into the stories of others. And I think it's important to be able to try and find every story that brings some sort of merit, and some sort of important life experience lessons into this world, regardless of who's doing it.
Man, that is profound. Um, I think the whole idea, and we talk about mental health in the podcast, like towards the end. Um, that is a very critical and self-aware observation. Um, and I've known you for years, bro. For years. Like, but the beautiful thing about, like you said at the beginning, like you always was in Baldwin, and it was like this is where it's at. But then taking the opportunity and taking the chance on extending yourself, um, you get that opportunity to be able to
Yeah.
see and really observe and learn other parts of yourself. And that is the beautiful thing, man. And I'm so glad that we're getting ready to dive into you, man. And so I guess a little bit more to go a little bit deeper into what you just said. What was one particular moment from your childhood that pretty much signifies what you are now?
One particular moment from my childhood.
Better way to put it, what childhood memory do you have that defines who you are today?
I feel like one of the things that as a child I embraced a lot, and I remember very distinctly when I was younger how when I said I'm going to grow up, I'm going to be like this, I'm going to be like that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to be able to handle myself. And this is when you're an elementary school kid, for instance, and you're still trying to figure things out. In kindergarten, it was I'm going to be an architect. In second grade, it was I'm going to be a meteorologist. And then you get to middle school, and you're like, oh, I'm going to be a musician. Um, the one thing that I remember very vividly from my childhood that didn't really come into play in my life until a few years into doing this was that despite all that, um, the thing I always kept coming back to as a kid was my dad's 1990s JVC tape camcorder. And I would always borrow it for things. I used to use it to do some WWE stop motion things with like all the action figures that I had. And I would spend time building sets to make things look more convincing, to the point where I even put lights in these sets. I was a little bit ridiculous with it. And for a long time I was always trying to figure out where the film side of me came from, because you know, took it on a whim senior of high school, just because I didn't really know what to do, and my senior year was kind of full of just classes that like I could take but I didn't have to. And oh, excuse me. And I saw and I took film and I was like, you know what, why not? I used to do this when I was a kid. I might as well have fun just as a thing, just to see how it is. And I'll never forget a moment where three things kind of clicked at once. I had finished my first trailer, just for the fun of it, and I'd actually worked really hard in trying to make it look semi decent. After I did that, I kind of got this really odd feeling, but like a not a bad odd feeling, like a good feeling, where I remembered a time in my life when I was younger where I watched my first stop motion video that I did, and how proud of myself I was for it, and how much fun I had making it. And as well as these silly little middle school trailers that my brother and our friends used to do. I remember one that was called "The Invasion of the Cannibalistic Pillows." Uh, we it was me and a bunch of buddies, and we just brought all of our pillows down into the basement, and we would. It was a bunch of poop jokes. It was almost Adam Sandler esque inspired, and we would just be throwing pillows at each other, and all of a sudden one of us died, and we found out that that pillow actually was eating that person alive. We were like, oh no. And then the rest of the pillows turned into these carnivore pillows.
Yeah,
So it reminded me of how stupid and silly fun that was, and I remembered the stupid and silly fun of the trailer, but it was a very different feeling from, oh, that was fun, I should definitely do this again sometime. It was the feeling of, that was fun, I want to do that again right now.
yeah,
Um, so it was kind of almost like a chain reaction between a bunch of different things that kind of led me to realize, like, the thing I wanted to do this entire time that I never realized was work in film in some way. And that was kind of the beginning of my journey. And while there's a lot of other things that I could think of, good moments, bad moments from elementary school, that could define parts of my character, I think that particular set of moments that link together that way defines me, or more so how I got to where I am, more than anything else.
yeah. And you went to BCC, right? And
Brooklyn College,
uh,
yeah.
started studying uh, film. What intrigued you to do that, like opposed to just going to your standard college? Why take a chance in regards to doing filmmaking? Because you can learn filmmaking on the go, but what was it that you felt like you were missing out on that you were able to grab?
So one of the things that Brooklyn College brought to me that a lot of other places wouldn't have been able to bring, in the sense of not colleges particularly, but other environments, is I had the opportunity to be around a group of people who also wanted the same thing I did. I'm taking a sip of my coffee, man. I can't take these yawnings anymore. Just for the people who are watching and or listening, before I continue, I go to bed at 3 a.m. because my work schedule is 12 to 8:30. So it throws everything off. um and when I mean I go to bed at 3 a.m., I mean I more so finish what I'm doing at 3 a.m., hop into bed by 3:30, and lay in there in hopes to God after my melatonin pill that I'll fall asleep in a matter of a few minutes. Thankfully, 8 out of 10 times I do. 2 out of 10 times we pull in all nighters, baby.
That's it. That's it.
Um, but to get back to the Brooklyn College thing, everybody has a different way to connect. Everybody has a different way to communicate with one another and to get to know each other and to put themselves in an environment of which that they could blossom and grow and that they could network it to each other. I met, for instance, my good friend Eric here through a project that I worked on my freshman year of Brooklyn College. I just transferred, yeah, freshman year of Brooklyn College.
That's crazy.
I had transferred from LaGuardia to Brooklyn College because I went to LaGuardia still kind of trying to make sure for sure that I knew what I wanted. And I'll be upfront about it. High school was hard. I was not a good student, but it wasn't because I couldn't do it. It was because I didn't care enough to. I was kind of rebellious in the
Did you go
classic
to a
way that
performing arts
kids.
school?
No, I went to no, I'm sorry, Baldwin High School. It
Oh,
was more so that um I had a bad history from elementary to middle school to high school of being bullied. I think I spoke to you about this a few other times. Or if I have not, huh, long overdue. There was a lot of instances where things got really, really bad. Family court was involved in some stuff too, which was not fun. So in high school and whatnot, I became just did not care about grades. Went to school to get just to get it done. I
yeah,
felt like I wasn't going anywhere. And then film came along. And my senior year of high school, when I found that, the one thing that I have come to know is that once you find something you love to do, and once you know that this is not just a thing you love to do, but the thing that you love to do and want to do, everything else clicks. All of a sudden, your confidence skyrockets. You know your people, you know what you want, and you're going to continue to do that. That year I was still struggling with a lot of self-confidence issues. However, as the time went on, I had also just grown to really, really appreciate everything.
yeah,
I had gone from being a student that did not care to, granted, it was a much easier year, but still, a student who was on the honors roll a few times that year. Um, and that was just because I had found the thing I wanted to do,
yeah,
and it made me do everything else with so much more effort.
yeah,
So when I found out that that's what I wanted to do, everything changed.
yeah,
And that's what led me to go to LaGuardia because I was like, I need to get my grades up. I want to get to a better school.
yeah,
Went to LaGuardia, got a higher GPA than I did in high school. Granted, I will say there were some classes I didn't do well in there. I went through a little bit of a slump period. But it wasn't a rebellious period. It was just a difficult time in my life. And one of the things at that time that I let affect me more than others was what was happening in my life kind of affected the way my grades were and the way the effort that I put into school was like. Once I got out of it and I got into Brooklyn College, I focused too heavily on film. And what I mean too heavily is when you go to college, this is the one downside of it that I don't like. You're required to take other courses, core courses. I'm going to be 100% honest. I think a lot of core courses that you take in college are a waste of time because if you're going to school for a particular thing, I understand it's important to be well rounded. But if I'm going to go to school for film, if I'm going to go to school for nursing, if I'm going to go to school for some kind of IT thing, anything technical or specific, the only thing that should matter are classes that pertain to those things,
yeah.
classes that are going to benefit with those things. Um,
Just to give an idea for the viewers, what kind of classes were you taking?
common core classes, things like that that you have to take, your English classes, your history classes, your science classes. I will say some of them were very interesting. Um, but if I had the option to take those classes or stuff my schedule full of just nothing but film and TV classes, I would have done film and TV classes.
Yeah.
100%. Um, so my freshman year, I took a bunch of video production course, and a bunch of other things. That was also the year that I met Chris London, who was the first director that I worked with at Brooklyn College, um, which led to Late for the Funeral, which is how I met this man right here. And we exchanged numbers then, and I believe it wasn't until the end of the school year, or towards the end of the school year, that I got a phone call from you about My Brother's Keeper. And I remember we had this big script planned, like this big shot list, all this stuff, and we had all these things that we wanted to do. But then when we sat down and we looked at how much time we had, and we looked
Yes.
at the, you know, how much time we had, the budget, um, the things that we were going to have to improvise with, like sound and whatnot, we were like, all right, we need to cut this down by like at least 2/3. It's way too big.
Yeah.
Um, and that was what led us to working on our first project together. I think it's also been a lot of fun. Um, and I know this is not off topic per se, but this is more so off of the question, because I feel like the question that you asked has been answered. Was when we started, I was still learning a lot of things about film, and you kind of saw me in the rawest of stages when I was still self conscious about a lot of things. And then by the time we had worked on the music video with, I think it was Greg, right? And then afterwards worked on the pilot episode of Roomy. I feel like I came into my own around that point. And Eric was kind of like the person that I feel like you grew with me a lot. We both were understanding our roles better and playing them the best we could. The only things that I wish didn't have to be so concerning was trying to squeeze those in between work days, for the simple reason that, like, that definitely made it more of a crunch for time. The amount of times that Eric has offered me to stay overnight at his place instead of having to drive home, I'm pretty sure was every single time that we did a shoot. Because if there's one thing everybody knows about film, is that start times are start times, but hard out times, unless you're a big
Very.
person, yeah, unless you're a big person working in the industry, your hard out time is not a hard out time. You
No.
leave when the job is done, and it is always worth it. But in those moments, I do wish that I could say we had a hard out that day because we had to rest for the next day, so that we could do it all over again. But more often than not, it was because I had to get back to New York because I had work the next day. Um, and it was a job I couldn't necessarily take off because they didn't have anybody else to replace me, which seems to be a funny thing to bring up, and kind of a perfect segue into my current job. But I'll let you ask another question.
So pretty much what I heard though was passion, man. It's like you go through all of that, uh, figuring yourself out and coming into your own and elevating and taking it to the next level. That it takes a lot of passion to do that, because in all of that, um, you're always like asking yourself, is this worth it? Is this something that's going to set me up for the next thing? And a lot of the times you really don't realize it or feel it or see it
Yeah.
until years and years later, which we can fast forward into now and what it is that you do now. But that's the whole purpose of the podcast, man, is just talking about like having those little signs, seeing them, and then actually following it through. when we first met, it was on another film project, and I was looking and I'm like, man, I need someone that knows what they're doing and is like actually doing it right now. And at the time around me, I didn't have that. So when I met you, it was like, this is where it's at. And so we had a particular vision, and though we knew that we couldn't get it done the way that we initially wanted it to, we got to the finish line, and that takes passion, that takes
Mm.
love. To be able to drive down from New York and stay late, bro. We would get done at like 3 a.m. Pretty much the time that you get done and you go to bed now.
That's actually really funny. Holy crap. I didn't even think about that.
It's like that is it's worth it. And I'm super glad to see you succeed and continue to take it to the next level, bro. So let's talk about that, bro. Let's talk about what it is that you do now. Let's talk about the leap that you took in regards to going down to DC, and let's talk about leading up to it, because I remember being in contact with you in the process of that, and
Mhm.
like staying in contact because I think we were working on a project and you had mentioned it while we were on set. So let's talk about that. How did you get from doing the films to Live Nation?
So, brief, interesting story about the year of 2022 into 2023. 2022 financially was one of the roughest years that I ever had. I had dozens of projects lined up that year, big projects, small projects, and the vast majority of them were canceled or postponed indefinitely because of budget constraints or because of COVID. Uh, and it was really kind of heartbreaking,
Yeah,
because I had done all this free work the year before to get ready to get back into it. And when things opened up, and I was already going to make it back into it. And aside from the summer gig, that year was really hard. Really, 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 really hard to get things done. And I remember booking a cruise with my girlfriend, and saying to her, I'm going to get a job by the time the cruise happens, so we'll be fine. I'm not worried about it. Well, that was a year of many interviews that got to the almost right there stage, and then it just being snatched away. First few times, it's a little more understandable because you're like, it's still early on, I'm still doing it. But then, like, when that happens every single time, it starts to really hurt, really, really hurt.
yeah,
I remember also I almost got scammed because people like to post fake remote job interviews now where they'll be like, hey, we need you for this, this, and this. We're going to send you this. Um, Let us know. Oh, no, let me restart that. They'll send you things like, hey, we need you for this, this, and this. Let us know, we'd like to work with you. And then you go through the whole process and they send you some money. And then you find out that the check is completely fake. And thank God I have a bank that is not a national bank. They are a local bank to Baldwin that I still use despite not living in New York anymore. And they meticulously analyze each and every transaction. And it's the greatest thing on planet Earth because I never have to worry about making a big mistake. They'll always help catch me when I'm falling, which is big, big relief there. Um, so leading up to that point, I remember Eric, you and I were having discussions about the project that you actually just mentioned before the podcast. That I'm not going to name for the simple reason that I would like people to see that when it comes out. And although I don't believe I'm going to be directly involved in it anymore in the sense of I won't be able to be on set with you, as you know. Um, I already told you, hey man, if you want color grading, I'll do it. Especially now with the new rig, it'll also be a lot faster. Um, but I remember being on set in Philadelphia with you, and I forget what park we were at, but we were right next to the river of some kind. And I turned to you and I said to you, "Hey, I'm not sure what's going on just yet, but I might be getting a job in DC. I'm just waiting to hear back from people." Now, this was before the cruise that I went on with my girlfriend. Go on the cruise, I heard nothing. It had been about 2 months since I did this initial interview. Heard nothing. Got an email back from a new guy. "Hey, we just hired somebody we hired to hire people for us. You have to go through the interview process again." Went through the interview process again. And me and this guy, just who is my boss now, just sat and talked and had a really fun interview. And within the first 20 minutes, he's like, "Listen, dude, I'm really heavily leaning towards you already. I'll call you back on Monday." And I remember that weekend was one of the most exciting and one of the most terrifying weekends, because this was closer than I had ever gotten before in any interview, aside from actually physically going to a company to practice on stuff, which had happened a few times. Sunday night rolls around, and I'm like starting to have doubts, as people do when they've been rejected so many times. What happens if this happens again? Can I handle it? What am I going to do? This was one of those make it or break it moments for me, where it was can I continue with the career that I want, or do I have to go to a career that I need, for survival? And I will never forget this. I didn't hear from him all day. And closing hours in my eyes are what popped around, which in news, closing hours are when it closes. There's no true set times to when news ends. If they need me at 1 o'clock in the morning, randomly they're like, "Hey, we need you to get here within the hour. Can you do that?" Hop on a train, go. Hop in the Uber, go. Or just get in my car and drive. That's the way it is. Hasn't happened yet, thankfully, but that's the way it is. And I was sitting in the parking lot waiting to pick up my girlfriend from work. And she'd been texting me all day if I heard anything. And when I put my car in park, I got a buzz on my phone. And it was like, that was the moment where everything just went. Where I'm not a religious person by any means, and I have not been a religious person for a very long time. Eric, you're very well aware of this. But I'm also very respectful of other people's religions. But that was one of those moments where I remember looking up and saying, "Hey, listen, I know I'm a skeptic and all this stuff, but like if you're up there, if you're the reason this is happening, man, like thank you. I'm gonna make you proud." And it was one of those very profound moments for me where I was just like, I feel like I was supposed to go through this period of time where things got hard, and I never really truly gave up, even if I got close to it. And because of that, life finally said, "All right, you're ready,
Ready.
and we're going to do this." And that was huge, absolutely huge. Um, Everything changed. I had to find an apartment in 6 weeks, which was one of the most stressful things I've ever had to do. Because let me tell you, living in New York is not cheap, but living in DC ain't cheap either, homie. um, it's definitely not. But
Very beautiful place, by the way.
oh yeah, it's very proud of it. I got very lucky. Um, No, but I remember so much how I went from almost like not making money, working a job that was just kind of there for people that just needed a job as a substitute teacher, and then just in a matter of weeks, cruise happens. One of the most important trips I've ever taken that made me appreciate life in ways I didn't appreciate before. Because going out of the country, you're gonna have a few different mindsets when you're a tourist. I don't give a shit about the other people, but I'm here for the extremities. I'm gonna have fun. I'm gonna enjoy myself. Or you go from it at this, man, I had an amazing time on this vacation. But the amount of places that I've been to that are considered tropical paradises where people live in poverty day in and day out because of the way that their government functions and the way that the world works for them is truly abysmal
Mm,
and heartbreaking.
yeah,
And that was one of those moments where I turned to my girlfriend and I said to her, we're not going on another cruise. We're not going on another international trip of any kind until we're making the money to where when we come, regardless of how we come, if it's a cruise again or if we do another like a trip somewhere, that we can assure that we are leaving a firm economic mark on people. And I'm not saying that we have to donate millions of dollars or thousands of dollars, but
yeah,
here in America, helping our own people is important. But if I go to a restaurant, I'm still going to tip them that 20%. But if I go to a restaurant in a different country where people are struggling, I'm going to tip them twice the bill, maybe more, because there's people that need food desperately and there's people that need financial stability desperately, and sometimes that little extra pocket of money makes a world of difference for people.
yeah,
And I would like to be able to do more, and at some point in my life, when I have the means to, I'm going to start some sort of charity fund specifically oriented towards some of these places to help them economically get off the ground without a big company coming in and corporatizing it.
yeah,
We don't need more corporatization. We need more individualization, culturalization of these areas to bring the best out of them.
yeah,
It makes no sense to have a company come in and establish expensive hotels or places for people to come and visit if the rest of the area is not going to benefit from it and if the rest of the area is going to continue to struggle.
yeah.
The economy there should be thriving for people, rich, middle class, even poor people should be able to live comfortably.
You look at companies, you look at companies like Bill Gates, Bezos, um, the guy that owns Quicken Loans. Um, those companies, though they have their big companies that they own, they also have many, many small businesses that they
Mm-hmm.
support and
Mm-hmm.
back. And like you said, it makes no sense for you to go to a resort city and the city that surrounds it, that pretty much built it up, um, is not thriving economically. I
Mm-hmm.
was listening to this guy say he's Nigerian and his lady, his fiance, is American, and he took her back home, and he was saying how important it is for like Nigerian men, African men, um, people who are born outside of the country to go back to their country and visit their motherland, because there is a um, now Nigeria, they're known for Lagos and stuff like that, but the community that surrounds it, those communities, that's where the heart of the place is. So when people come here and visit Atlantic City, I'm not impressed for what you do on Atlantic Avenue. I'm impressed on what you do the block over, which is Pacific up into the Black Horse Pike, because that's what's keeping the city up and running on a day-to-day basis when it's not in season. So
Mm-hmm.
you make a very good point when you say that it's very, very saddening. I've never been out the country, but my lady, she keep saying that we should do it, and we're in conversations for something now. But that is so powerful, dude, because a lot of those people are working on cents on the dollar,
Mm,
and where they're just getting by over in their country, they wouldn't be able to survive here on that type of
no.
pay. So it's man, it's that's eye opening. If people can realize it, that yeah, you're going to these places to visit, but really take if you can, because certain places are dangerous. I wouldn't advise anyone going into those like
No,
certain
yeah.
areas. But like if you get a chance to be of change, to make a difference, definitely do so. Bless those
I
people that are over there.
I also feel like what's important to remember too, because you bring up that there are certain areas that are dangerous, right? And you know, we hyperanalyze this stuff, and uh I think that it is important for people to also understand that hyperanalyzing it, while it's a good thing, can also be a bad thing. And what I mean by that is I live in a place that is beautiful and really quiet. I can go out at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and I haven't had any issues just sitting outside enjoying myself. That said, a lot of other places in the DC area, DC is a really strange place. You have areas that are really wildly wealthy, blocks away from places that are not. Um, they're just usually absolutely wrecked with crime and gangs and all this stuff. And the thing that bothers me so much about the way people talk about those things is law enforcement's important in that regard, right? Like law enforcement should be able to step in and help out in those situations, but that's like putting a band-aid on a wound that's way too big for it, right? That's like slapping something, like let's say you get a really big gash in your hand. That's like taking a temporary bandage, wrapping it up, but you're not stitching it. You're just temporarily slowing the bleed.
Yeah.
The biggest problem that I have is that people often look to that and think that the people themselves are bad. And I would argue that far more often than not, the people in those situations are not at all bad people. They are people that were put into bad situations and had to adapt into what we consider negative situations in order to survive
Circumstance.
in circumstance. And you can look at somebody like you could look at somebody and say, oh, they're